The wind pressed fiercely against the mansion windows, but nothing was louder than the sentence Daniel shouted across the hall. It cut through the room like a blade, freezing Maya where she stood. She clutched the strap of her small bag with one hand and placed the other protectively over her stomach, trying to calm the trembling that rose from somewhere deeper than fear. She had come with hope, a fragile hope she had repeated to herself all morning. Yet the moment she saw the coldness in his eyes, that hope cracked. "I needed to tell you," she whispered, her voice almost swallowed by the echoing silence. "I'm expecting, and I believed you deserved to know." She waited, just one heartbeat, for kindness, surprise, anything. But Daniel's expression tightened instead, like someone trying to lock away emotions he refused to face. He took a step back, not forward. "Maya, this cannot happen," he said sharply, each word controlled but shaking underneath. "My life is structured. My world is planned. I will not change everything now." Her breath caught. She had imagined fear, confusion, maybe even shock, but not this. Not rejection dressed as logic. She felt the air thicken around her, as if the walls themselves were closing in. For a second, she thought he might soften. His eyes flickered, uncertain. But then the moment vanished, replaced by a final, cold dismissal. And in that instant, Maya realized something. This was the moment her life would split in two. This was the moment everything would change. The door clicked shut behind her, but the sound followed Maya long after she stepped into the cold night. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from the weather, but from the sudden emptiness that felt too heavy to hold. The streetlights blurred as she walked, each step slow, uncertain, as if the world beneath her feet had changed shape. She kept waiting for her phone to ring, for Daniel to realize what he had done, to call her back. But the silence stayed unbroken. A taxi stopped when she raised her hand. But even inside its warmth, she felt the chill of his final words. She stared out the window as the city lights passed, each one reminding her of a future she had once imagined so clearly. Now everything looked distant, unfamiliar, like she was watching someone else's life through a fogged mirror. When she reached the small room she rented, she sat on the edge of the bed and placed her hand over her stomach again. A faint movement pressed gently against her palm, as if the tiny life inside her was whispering strength she didn't know she had. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing through the ache. She could not stay trapped in what she lost. She needed a new place, a new start, a new version of herself, one stronger than the girl who walked into Daniel's house. What she didn't know was that while she tried to rebuild quietly, far away from him, her absence had already begun to echo in Daniel's structured world more sharply than he could ever admit. Weeks turned into months. In the small town she moved to, slowly began to shape itself around her new life. Maya found a modest apartment on the second floor of an old brick building, the kind that creaked when the wind pushed against it. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a hint of safety. She worked late nights on her freelance projects, keeping the lights on with quiet determination. But even in the steady rhythm of her new routine, there were moments that stopped her cold, moments when a familiar scent or a distant voice reminded her of everything she had left behind. Yet each time doubt crept in, a soft flutter inside her steadied her heart. She would pause, hand on her stomach, and whisper, "I'm here. I won't fail you." One early morning, while the sun was still climbing over the rooftops, she felt the strongest movement yet. It startled her, then filled her with an emotion so powerful it erased every shadow from the past. This child wasn't a burden. This child was her turning point. Still, questions lingered like ghosts at the edges of her mind. Did Daniel ever wonder where she went? Did he ever regret the way he ended everything? She didn't know. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. But far away, in a city of glass towers and busy streets, Daniel had begun noticing something missing, something he couldn't name, something he couldn't silence no matter how hard he tried. The day Maya went into labor arrived without warning, sharp and overwhelming. The hospital room felt too bright, too cold. Yet she held on with every ounce of strength she had gathered over those long months. When the first cry filled the room, her heart cracked open in a way she had never known. Moments later, the second cry followed, softer but just as powerful. 2 small lives, 2 tiny hands, 2 new reasons to fight. Holding them, she felt the world shift. Their eyes, calm and bright, seemed to ask her for a promise, and she silently gave it. She named them Aiden and Arya, names that sounded like hope and beginnings. Nights were long, mornings exhausting, but every breath they took filled the small apartment with a warmth she had never felt before. As they grew, neighbors slowly became her support. Mrs. Hale from downstairs brought warm meals on colder days. A young student offered to help carry groceries up the stairs. The building, once just walls and doors, began to feel like a tiny, unexpected village around her. One afternoon, as Aiden giggled and Arya clapped her small hands, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years, a quiet kind of joy. The past no longer hurt as sharply. The future no longer frightened her. Yet even in this peace, an unanswered question lingered in the back of her mind, one she rarely allowed herself to face. What would happen if Daniel ever learned the truth? And miles away, Daniel's perfectly controlled world had already started to unravel, haunted by a silence he could no longer outrun. Daniel's success grew louder, but his life grew quieter. Meetings, interviews, handshakes. Everything looked perfect from the outside, yet something inside him felt hollow, like a room missing all its furniture. He tried to drown the emptiness in work, in travel, in conversations that never reached the heart. But every night, when the city lights dimmed and he finally stood alone in his penthouse, a strange ache settled in his chest. It was the kind of ache that didn't come from loss. It came from something unfinished. He began noticing small things. The way he paused at baby stores without knowing why. The way he looked longer at families passing by. The way he avoided certain streets because they reminded him of a life he had walked away from. His assistant thought he was just tired. His friends thought he was stressed. But Daniel knew better. Something inside him was shifting. Something he had buried coming back to the surface with quiet insistence. One evening, he found himself standing at the window, staring at the city below. A thought struck him so sharply he had to hold the edge of the glass for balance. What if she had needed him? What if she had faced everything alone? The memory of her voice, her trembling words, the moment he turned away. It suddenly felt heavier than any burden he had ever carried. He didn't know Maya's new address. He didn't know where she went, who she became, or what her life looked like now. He only knew one thing, with growing certainty. Walking away had been the worst choice of his life, and fate, already moving quietly behind the scenes, was about to put him directly in front of the truth he had been running from. The moment arrived on an ordinary afternoon, ordinary for everyone except Daniel. He had been invited as a guest speaker at a community event, a small charity program far from his usual world of polished stages and flashing cameras. He agreed without knowing why, only feeling an unusual pull towards something he couldn't name. As he stepped inside the hall, children's laughter echoed softly, warm and bright. He glanced around, trying to steady himself, when a pair of small voices caught his attention. 2 children stood near a table, drawing with bright crayons, a boy with curious eyes. A girl with a soft smile. Something about them held him captive. Something familiar, something impossible to ignore. Then a woman approached them, bending to fix the boy's collar. Her hair fell gently over her shoulder, and for a heartbeat, Daniel forgot how to breathe. When she lifted her head, he felt the world tilt. It was Maya. Older, stronger, radiant in a way that came from surviving storms and building a life from nothing. Their eyes met, and the ground beneath him seemed to shift. The children looked up too, 2 faces with bright, calm eyes. Eyes that reflected his own, his breath caught. His chest tightened. It felt as if time stood very still. Maya didn't speak at first. She simply watched him, steady and unafraid. She had walked through fire and come out unbroken. Daniel finally stepped forward, voice trembling despite all his practiced confidence. "Maya, are they—" She didn't answer right away. Instead, both children moved to her side, their hands slipping naturally into hers. That silent gesture spoke louder than anything she could say, and in that moment, Daniel understood the truth. He wasn't just meeting 2 children. He was meeting the future he had once thrown away. and the second chance he never thought he'd receive.